So greetings and welcome, everyone. On behalf of our hardworking committee, the UC Davis Student Health and Counseling Services, and the City of Davis, I would like to welcome and thank each of you for coming to the Davis Cannabis Town Hall Forum 2018. Tonight is going to be filled with a lot of information, some personal stories, and opportunities for each of us to engage in different ways. Because of this, I want to share a few key points and some ground rules as we get started. First, by no way does the committee collectively take a stance of being pro or against the use of cannabis. Our goal is to provide a breadth and depth of information and expertise regarding use, legality, and personal experiences. Varying perspectives will be shared by our presenters. We challenge attendees to accept multiple truths, as any part of tonight's agenda can evoke strong emotions, thoughts, and/or opinions. We ask that you be respectful of those sharing and presenting their experiences, as this is a challenging task and definitely far from simplistic. We on the committee are here tonight, spread throughout the space. At any moment, we may decide to change the direction of the program based on our assessment. Please be understanding and patient. However, we will be committed to sticking to the agenda as much as possible. During the second half of the program, we will have some dedicated time for questions and answers. There is a process for how that part of the program will go. Everyone should have received a blue piece of paper when you came in. You can turn in your questions. There's a collection basket that will be outside in the lobby during intermission. Or we have even volunteers who are throughout the space tonight who can also collect those questions, or along the stairwell, some of them will be located. Please note that we will be grouping similar questions in order to cover as many topics as possible, because we understand there are a lot of questions out there. Also note that questions submitted with registration will be answered first. We did collect questions up until noon today. We do ask that you please follow the system that is in place so we can effectively answer questions. On that note, it will be impossible to cover all the topics around cannabis. We will do our best to equally represent a variety of topics in our question selection. If you have a question that was unable to be answered, some of us will be available afterwards to assist or answer some of those questions. Additionally, one of the things we really hope is that you will take some things from here, do your own research to learn more. If you have some thoughts or provoked, we want you to spark future conversations in your social and professional networks. Lastly, if you need to step out, the restrooms are out to your right when you walk out the back doors. Photos will be taken throughout the time tonight. If for any reason you do not consent to having your photos taken, please let any one of us know. We will make sure that that is handled. Again, we want to say welcome and thank you for coming. I just said a lot. I won't say any more. First up, we have Stephanie Lake, who is the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drug Intervention Services Coordinator at UC Davis.
Yay. Okay. Can everybody hear me? God. Okay, because I can't see anybody because they've got lights shining on me. So my basic job is to talk about just some basic information about cannabis. As Christa mentioned, this is a very large topic that has a lot of different things. So I'm going to keep my remarks brief. There will also be a panel, so I will take questions later. So there are different ways of using cannabis. And one of the things that I always love to start with is, I went to college. I'm going to age myself back in the 80s. So when I was in college, there was really kind of like one way. Well, maybe two. You either smoked it or you ate it. That was really about it. Now, there's gummies, there's soda, there's candy bars, there's oils, there's tinctures, there's vaping, there's regular smoking. So again, there's a lot of different ways people can ingest it now and use it. So I just think it's important to know when we're talking about cannabis, it's important to talk about which way are you using it. And when I meet with students, I'm always like, are you having flour? Or are you doing edibles or concentrates or gummies? And they're like, oh. So there's lots of different ways to use it. The other thing is there's also the concentrates. And one of the things that I always say is if someone like put a gun to my head and said, what's the most dangerous part of the marijuana use today? It would be the concentrates or the dabs and the wax. Basically, the way they are made is they take the oil, they take a butane torch, they cook it. There's noxious gases. We've actually known of refrigerators when they put it in to cool that have blown up. And then you take it, once it's cool, you take a little dab or a wax, hence the reason it's called a dab or a wax. You put it into a special bong specifically for the dabs and the wax, and then you take a propane torch and you light it up. And the dabs and the waxes, the THC level, and that's tetrahydroxycannabinol, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, is what gets you high. That's anywhere from 70 to 90% THC. So most people, when they're using it, they want to have fun. A lot of people, when they're using the dabs and the wax, they're not having fun. They're passing out. They're having hallucinations. You know, I had one student say to me, it's the methamphetamine of cannabis. So it's just something and that's what it looks like. Just so if people are wondering what it looks like, that's what it looks like. The other thing is, you know, there's medical use versus THC. Medical use is the cannabinoids, and that's the CBD. And we actually have cannabinoids in our brain. So the THC, which is the delta hydroxycannabinoid, that's what gets you high. CBD does not get you high. CBD is actually just part of your system. And it's what we're now looking at when people are looking at medicinal use. That's what they're looking at is more CBD related. So if we think about, you know, the different strands, and that's one of the things that people say, but Steph, you know, I use the cannabis sativa and I feel fabulous. Well, that's got higher THC and lower CBD. Then you've got the indica, which is both CBD and THC. It's got about the same. And then there's and I can never pronounce this, the rudimentaris, which has got the high CBD and the low THC. And those are the normal strains. And then you've also got more hybrids. So one of the things that happens when people are growing is they've started growing different hybrids. So it's important if you're looking at getting cannabis, you know what you're using. It's the same thing I tell students when they're drinking, you know. You need to know that one drink is a drink and that if you're having like a Long Island iced tea, that's not one, that's 6. So it's important to know if you are going to be using it, what are you using? And medicinally, we do know that some of the things that we're using for cannabis could be, you know, more of the CBD infused. So like if you're doing a tincture that's got more CBD, that's going to actually help. There has been some studies shown that it does help with seizure disorders, with mood disorders, with things like that. One of my favorite slides, which I'm going to get to in a minute, is around sleep. So I'll talk about sleep in a minute. But I think it's also important to think about the cannabis of today versus the cannabis of when I was in school. So when I was in college, again, back in the 80s, the THC was anywhere from 3 to 5%. So a lot of times when I was talking with people, they're like, yeah, I get high, and I kind of think I'm addicted, but I don't think I really can be addicted physically. I can only be addicted mentally. And I'm like, well, you're probably right. Well, now, if we're looking, so the thing on the left would be the cannabis that I was in my day. Now on the right is the cannabis of 2018. And the THC level is anywhere from 11 to 37, and that's normal. So sometimes it can be more. Very often is it less. So again, you know, the bottom one is called Purple Haze. And that's probably, I think, 47% THC. So again, it's important to realize that when people are like, but dude, it's just pot, it's not just pot anymore. It's much more difficult. And as someone who works in the field of addiction, I am seeing so much more addiction. I was actually just asked by someone in the last 20 minutes, when did I start seeing a rise in cannabis dependency or addiction? And I would say like 4 to 5 years ago. Before it even became legalized, I started seeing it because the growers are smart. They've got it more and more and more addictive because it's higher and higher and higher levels of THC. So it's just something to think about when people are using, to know that, Yes, it can be used, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. It can be used recreationally the same way alcohol can be used. However, it can also be used to the point where it becomes really addictive. The other thing is, so to keep in mind, as I said, yes, it can be used recreationally. Some studies have shown it's about like once a month. And when I'm meeting with students, I usually hear this, once a month. Some people say it's once a week. And what I say is it's really about how it's affecting you. If it's affecting your grades, if it's affecting your skills, if it's affecting how you're dealing with things. But one of the things that's really important is on Davis's campus, we take federal funds. So even though it's statewide, it's become legalized, you're not able to use it on campus. You'll never be able to use it on campus. You can't use it in the residence halls. You can't use it on campus. You can't vape it. You can't smoke it. You can't eat it. You can't do any of it. So it's just important to know that. And again, as I said, it can be used medicinally. We're still studying how it can be used, but I've actually seen some really good people using the CBD salves to help with like back pain and muscle pains. I have a really good friend that has really bad rheumatoid arthritis, and she's put some salve on her arms, and she's like, oh my God, I can now move my arm. So it can be used medicinally. And can it be addictive? And I think this is the important thing. If you remember nothing else, it can become addictive. So I think it's important to know 9% of adults who use will become addicted. And I think a lot of people are like, but it's just a plant. Guess what? Heroin's a plant. Coke's a plant. Alcohol's a plant. The only thing that's not a plant is methamphetamine, because that's actually man-made in a lab. Everything else is first made as a plant. And one of the things I love to tell my students is poison ivy's a plant. Doesn't mean I'm going to use it. And they're like, oh, good point. Also, if people start using as teenagers, they are 2 to 4 more times to have a dependence within 2 years. And I think that's really important because young people today have this idea, well, it's safer than alcohol because I don't go out and get into fights. No, but they may actually end up doing other things like sitting around talking and, getting high constantly and having a really major amotivational syndrome, which is one of the biggest things that I see is how the amotivational syndrome keeps coming up more and more and more. Again, 1 in 6 adolescents become addicted. And also, adolescent addiction rate is almost the same as adult cocaine addiction. So again, I have a very dear friend, John Daly, who passed away 2 years ago. And he was one of my mentors. And one of the things he said is, we need to stop putting alcohol and marijuana in one category and the other drugs in another category. A drug is a drug is a drug. And it's really about the relationship to intoxication. And I think that's really important. Again, because it's really about how someone feels and why they're using. That's one of the things that I'm working with students on is where are they at when they're using. Another thing that, this is from the National Academy of Science. And this is what I'm seeing a lot more of in my office, too. And I work in the health center, so I'm working with the docs a lot, and they're seeing this as well. Is higher levels of use, the greater risks of developing schizophrenia earlier. I had one student that every time he used anything, marijuana, mushrooms, anything, he would have a psychotic break. And he finally ended up, we had to institutionalize him because he didn't come down from that psychotic break for over a month. So again, and his schizophrenia tendencies were coming on. He was hearing voices and things like that. So I've definitely seen this. And this is with a 22-year-old well-developed male. The other thing is there's a greater impact for earlier age. Again, depending on your quality, how much you're using, the quantity. There can be other things. The biggest thing that I'm seeing is social anxiety disorder. Marijuana does help some people with their social anxiety, but what I've seen is it flips. And it's not like some of the other drugs where I can be like, oh, after this time, you're definitely addicted. It depends on the person. It also depends on your history and what's going on in your family and things like that. But I would say if there's anything I can remember is that cannabis and tobacco do not mix well. So you really, really, really want to, because of the spliffs and the mobiles, I'm seeing more anxiety. I am seeing more depression. I'm seeing more consequences. And sleep. Absolutely, marijuana impacts sleep. So my time is up. I will be happy to answer any more questions, but the one thing I will say is because marijuana stays in your system for up to 3 hours, anytime you have cannabis in your system, you're not going to get good REM sleep for 3 hours, and you need that REM sleep to move your short-term memories into your long-term memories. So thank you.
So next we would like to invite Officer Ron Turn and Lieutenant Danny Sheffield from the City of Davis Police Department and UC Davis Police Department.
Hi, thank you for having me. The one thing I will comment on, first off, 20 years I've been here at the police department, I've never been in here. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. And the second thing, if my daughters could see me with this microphone, they'd be jealous. Oh, I'm sorry. Could someone help me? Thank you. Got it. Thanks. Okay. My name's Ron Turn. I work for the City of Davis Police Department. I've been here for just under 20 years. I was hired in 1998. Just a little bit about me. I started off in patrol. I was a canine handler, worked investigations, and currently I'm assigned to cannabis regulation for the city. Once cannabis started coming on the radar in Davis, the chief asked me if that would be something I'd be interested in doing, and being from, going to college in Santa Cruz and living in Santa Cruz for a long time, told him I'd do it. So there's a picture of my dog. I always show that, just he's sort of my good luck charm. I'm going to talk real quickly or briefly about a lot of things. There's a lot to it, and obviously I'll give you some points, but everybody can look at, most people probably already know a lot of this stuff, and you can always find it, on the state, from the city. But just touching on it, Prop 215. Proposition 215. Passed in 1996, the Compassionate Use Act allowed persons 18 and older, primary caregivers with a recommendation and issued ID card to grow, possess, and use cannabis. For a long time, as an officer, we would see that. Stop people with cannabis and then show you the card. And, then in 2016, Prop 64 is passed by the voters, comes into law on November 9th, and now, as a 21-year-old or older, you can start using cannabis. So cannabis sort of changed in that sense. As far as police departments go, we don't even really necessarily look at it as far as enforcement stuff goes. You have to do a lot of things by the state to be illegal. In other states, probably not. And again, although California chose to legalize cannabis under 64, it's still Schedule 1 illegal controlled substance under federal law. The permitted usage after 64 legalizes cannabis use for persons over 21 years of age. It allows you to possess, transport, purchase, obtain, give away up to 28.5 grams of non-concentrated or 8 grams of concentrated cannabis. The only thing you can't do without a state license is sell it. So as long as you're doing these other things and you're over 21, you're compliant. You can also cultivate 6 cannabis plants within a private residence, and I'll go over that a little bit more. Issues faced by California cities after Prop 64, what are we going to do? Davis passed a moratorium on cannabis in the city. They extended it until they were able to get their municipal codes and city ordinances written. And in my opinion, they did an excellent job. They took the time, they researched it, they talked to people, they didn't rush, and they've come up with a good set of of rules. Here's some of it in the municipal code. You can look under Chapter 21. It tells about for businesses and things like that. These two ordinances talk about personal cultivation and then cannabis zoning and regulation in the city. But there's a ton of stuff on the City of Davis website. Currently in the city, there's the city council approved 5 dispensaries. Currently operating today, there's 3 dispensaries. There's 2 more that are coming. I would say probably within the next 6 months. Hopefully we'll have those in. We also have 2 volatile manufacturers that operate, and then we have 1 delivery service with another one that's with 2 more that are coming soon. We also have a testing facility that's coming, and in my estimation, there'll probably be another 10 or 15 cannabis businesses within the next year. That's my guess. That has kept me very busy. Here's just touching on indoor uses. City of Davis, unlike, allows you let's go back. Under Prop 64, you can grow 6 plants inside your residence. Medicinal is based on square footage. Here's some definitions for personal cultivation. But basically, as a 21 or older person, you can grow 6 plants in your house. If you have a medicinal card and you're a medicinal user, inside you can have 50 square feet. Whatever you can fit in that 50 square feet. If you are a primary caregiver for more people, then it goes up to 250 square feet. And just recently I saw one that was pretty close to that. And this person had about 70 plants in there. That's his choice. He had his cards and it's legal. Here's some more stuff. Again, you can find this on the Davis website. Indoor cultivation may occur inside a dwelling and or accessory building. Here's the square footage stuff, medicinal stuff. Landlords are not precluded from limiting or prohibiting cannabis by tenants. So if you're a renter, it's probably in your best interest to talk to your landlord first. Outdoor, Davis is the only city that I know of in the county that allows outdoor cultivation. Maybe one, probably in this region. But they allow you to permitted in residential districts. Outdoor personal cultivation is permitted in the rear side yard, and you have to follow these rules. It has to be closed by a solid opaque fence. It has to be a certain height. You can't see it from the sidewalk or other public ways. You've got to be 21 or older, and again, as a 21-year-old or older, you can have 6 plants. If you're medicinal, it changes a little bit. Here's some of our prohibited stuff. For persons over 21, you can't possess 28.5 grams of cannabis or 8 grams more than 28.5 grams or more than 8 grams of concentrated cannabis. Again, you cannot sell it without a state license. You can do everything else. You can give it away. You can do whatever you want. Just don't sell it. If you sell it, it's a problem. You can't smoke cannabis in a public place, and you can't smoke cannabis where smoking tobacco is prohibited. You can't smoke in a vehicle. All the DUI laws apply to smoking cannabis and driving a car. If you do that, you could be stopped. If an officer finds that you're impaired, you could be arrested for that. Under our 1821 medicinally with card, same as above. The only thing you can't do, I put on there, you can't walk into a dispensary which is for 21. The other things up there at 5. I think the other thing is, I think the misconception, at least with public consumption of cannabis, is that I'm over 21, I can smoke wherever I want. Not true. You could potentially get a citation in the city. Our best hope, or our goal, is to educate people so people are making the right choices. My role as cannabis regulation officer this is just sort of a little snippet of it, but I review all the applications that come in for the businesses and determine if the security component is acceptable to the police department. And most what I'm looking for is that it's safe for the business owners, the consumers, and the public in general. I do weekly regulation of all commercial cannabis businesses, going inside, making sure they're following all the city rules, state rules. And if you've seen the state rules, there's about 136 pages of rules. So, but the businesses we have here are excellent, and they do a very good job at making sure they're following. Criminal cases, other issues. If you guys have any questions, concerns about cannabis, you need something asked from the police department's perspective, here's my information. Please call me. And if you have any problems with cannabis in the city, call the police department, ask for me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, and I'll help you with whatever you need. Thank you very much.
So next we would like to welcome Dr. Karen Moe from the UC Davis Health System.
Hi, my name is Karen Moe. I just want to start out with, I feel like I'm going to go a little hard and fast because I feel like it's a little stacked on the, not exactly that cannabis has a lot of benefits, but I'm here to talk about the benefits. So, first of all, for the lawyers in the room, I'm going to start off with some disclaimers. I here today am not representing UC Davis. I'm just me, just a doc that does what I can to help people. I will not tonight at any time be giving individual medical advice. I can't really do that, so I'm not going to do that, even though a lot of people end up trying to get me to do that tonight, but I'm not going to. I am not here promoting cannabis use for everyone. I am the mother of teenagers. I do believe cannabis has a role as a medical use, and that's really different than recreational use to escape or get high. So I really want to differentiate that those are two different things. I'd like you to think about like pain medication that you take after surgery or you break a bone versus people shooting up heroin. So I really think that there's really differences, and I want people to think about that. I'm starting hard with Dr. William Woodward. So we're going to go back to when Prohibition began in 1937 in the United States of America. Cannabis used to be used regularly for medical uses here in the U.S. all the time. A lot of people used it. In fact, at Corner Drug, they have little bottles that have cannabis in them from back in the day, which is cool. Dr. Woodward stood before the House committee when they were prohibiting this and stated, "The American Medical Association knows of no evidence that marijuana is a dangerous drug." This man was a trained medical doctor and lawyer. And then we have politics as usual. On the other side of the field was Harry Anslinger, who was at the time the chief of what is now our DEA. He stated, "There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the US. Most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz and swing, result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others." So, just saying things, repeating things and saying them loudly doesn't necessarily making them true, as we know today. Again, a little later on in 1972, President Nixon hired a gentleman, Schaefer, commissioned him to study the effects of marijuana to see if this was something, oops, I skipped ahead. Can I go back? There we go, sorry. Schaefer came up with a lot of information that actually, again, disproved the dangers of this medicine. Nixon threw away that commission. Anyone can look this up, Google Schaefer Commission, read about it. This gentleman, John Ehrlichman, was an assistant to President Nixon and was interviewed about 20 years later. He stated, "You want to know what this was really all about? Nixon had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt these communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." I bring this up, and I know it's all kind of really blah, but I just want you to know what the history is behind how we have come to this stigma of making this medicine be something people don't want us to use. So there are a multitude of medical conditions. I've only listed very few. In my practice, the main one is chronic pain. We are currently in a war on drugs. The war on drugs is the opioid crisis. Opioids are a huge problem in medicine. I face it every single day. The rules that have been put before me that make my job extremely difficult and still try to help people is very difficult. They told us we can't use that anymore, and there's lots of restrictions, but they didn't really give us much of an alternative. This is an alternative to help people with chronic pain, and I am doing that. Ironically, the FDA does have approved uses for both nausea with cancer and chemotherapy-induced issues like that, as well as why it became legal in 1996 for compassionate care was because of AIDS. So AIDS people were wasting away, and they really needed to have something to help boost their appetite and survive, and this was something that helped them, and that is why that Medical Compassionate Use Act came into play. You may be surprised to know that for the nausea and appetite, it actually is THC. THC does have medicinal uses. It is not as useful in the high dose strains that people are using to get high, but it does have, for those two issues, you do need THC. So yes, CBD has its medicinal uses as well, primarily as a pain reliever, anti-inflammatory pain, but like neuropathic pain, THC is actually going to be better for you. For sleep, actually, you need a little bit of THC. Too much CBD actually is going to keep you up. So you got to be cautious with that. And there's a lot of misinformation. And so there are sources like leafly.com where people can look up and find more research about the specific cannabinoids. Indeed, there are cannabinoids that our own body makes. And unfortunately, our medical schools aren't teaching us anything about it, despite them being discovered about 20 years ago. Anxiety, you're going to get more relief probably with more CBD. As you can think in science and receptors, this medicine binds to one receptor and might do one thing, and a different medicine might bind to the same receptor but do something else, because they're slightly different. Often in my talks I do put up the little biochemical, all the benzene rings and stuff. I didn't do that tonight because I had limited time. But they do work differently, and they can actually do opposite things. What they primarily do is help us with balance in our system. So using equal doses or different uses can achieve balance for you in a lot of different ways. I'm not going to get into all the seizures for little kids. Go watch Sanjay Gupta's presentations with CNN. Drug addiction. I don't want you to think of cannabis as a gateway drug. I want you to leave here tonight thinking of cannabis as an exit drug. Cannabis is going to get people off opioids, as well as benzodiazepines and a lot of other truly medicinally addictive substances. I am going to touch on that a little bit because we spoke of addiction earlier. The medical addiction term means that a chemical binds to a receptor and leads to tolerance, meaning like alcohol, you drink one beer, you get an effect. Eventually you need to get 2 beers to get that same effect, right? And eventually people need more and more. And if they stop drinking beer when their effect is requiring 10 or so or more, they're going to withdraw, and people can die from alcohol withdrawal. You cannot die from cannabis withdrawal. It doesn't work like that. You can stop cold turkey. Yes, maybe you might want it. You might not feel that great, but you're not going to die. We don't have people going into, rehab where they have to get weaned off and given medicine to help them survive. That doesn't happen. So there is no withdrawal that occurs with cannabis. In the same way with a lot of other legal drugs. I do like to bring up that I discourage the smoking of this product for medicinal use. That is not something I typically encourage. I also wanted to touch here one little bit on CBD derived from the hemp plant, which is very different than CBD derived from the cannabis plant. And there are a lot of people out there that are mixing these things up. And you can buy it at your grocery store because it's not cannabis. It's not regulated in any way, similar to how the vitamins you buy at the grocery store are not regulated. In the state of California, cannabis now is regulated. You can know what you're getting in each dose that you're getting given to you at a medicinal dispensary, so they're very, very different. We definitely need more science, research, and education. We need to understand this medicine. I need to understand this medicine. I don't stand up here as an expert. I stand up here as an interested party that wants to help people, and I learn something new every day. And I certainly don't know as much as I hope to someday. And I just am learning from the people around me and from my patients, because they tell me how it's helping them. We need to decriminalize this, and we need to reschedule it. Being a Schedule I drug, it's ridiculous to me that the FDA can say that it's approved for some uses, yet say it's not useful for any medicinal uses. I just don't even understand that. We do need to also teach in medical school that there is cannabinoid receptors and how this medicine works on those. I really also just wanted to pose here, there are people self-medicating. So a lot of our teens, for example, I believe, are self-medicating with cannabis. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. Do you think when they go to the doctor and they want to ask about the use of cannabis and the doctor just says, no, just say no, are they going to listen? Or are they going to listen to the doctor that says, tell me about the symptoms that you're getting relief. Tell me about what you're using. Tell me about where you're getting it. I personally feel that it is much better for people of different ages and needs to be getting it from a safe place where we know that it's good and it doesn't have pesticides and poisons and problems, and we know that it has in it what it says it has in it. So getting it from safe locations and being educated to educate them. Don't get me wrong, I got teens that come in and are like, Doc Mo, give me a medical card. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving you a medical card unless we have a conversation. And then I really do steer them toward really different products, really different delivery systems that are healthy for them. I am going to point out to you that the United States of America is moving in this direction. Currently, well, this slide is actually from 2016, where 59.3% of states had some sort of legal marijuana law on the books. As of Tuesday, it went up to 64%. Michigan made it rec legal. Utah and Missouri made it medical legal. This is an important slide to me, and it goes back again to truth about medicine and receptors in our body. Annual causes of death from drugs in the United States from tobacco, alcohol, and prescription drugs is much, much, much higher, and something that I deal with every day. Of course, illicit drug use is also a huge problem. Cannabis cannot cause you to overdose. It's been tested, it's been tried, it cannot. You will not smoke a whole bunch of cannabis and go to sleep and wake up dead. That is not going to happen. It doesn't work in the receptors, because your brainstem, where alcohol, benzodiazepines, and other drugs bind to the receptors in your brainstem and prohibit you from breathing. It stops you from breathing. Cannabis receptors are not in that part of your body. This, and I am going to point out that I am using acknowledgments of the sources. This is from a Journal of Pain article, a study that came out of the University of Michigan in 2016. There was a 64% reduction of opioid use in this study. And then also, I don't know how well you can see it, but a 45% improvement in people's quality of life based on scores. This is helping people. And my source is from a good medical journal. Also, there is much less death from opioids. This is from JAMA. JAMA is the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is a conservative organization. I'm actually not a member. Their study between 1999 and 2010 showed that in medical marijuana states, opioid overdose deaths were reduced almost 25%. We cannot ignore that. It's an exit drug. I'm going to say it again. This is just the slide that I end on all the time because really it isn't. I am going to tell you that between 3 and 5 patients a week come to my office for a consultation. I've been asked since January to speak at a multitude of different organizations, primarily senior organizations with the start of Maria, whoop whoop, for the Senior Commission, URC, the Carlton. These people are very, very interested. I have patients coming into my office for consultation on a regular basis. They're not going away. Thank you very much.
Next, we would like to welcome Dr. Ron Chapman and Myra Miranda from Yolo County Health and Human Services and the California Department of Public Health.
So, this might be better. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So, good evening. Thank you. My name is Myra Miranda, and I am a policy analyst with the California Tobacco Control Program. So, a little bit about the program. CTCP, or the California Tobacco Control Program, was established in 1988 through Proposition 99, which we call the tobacco tax, where 3 cents out of that 25-cent tax went to the California Tobacco Control Program and launched a lot of public education campaigns and helped raise awareness and denormalize tobacco and smoking. So a little bit about why maybe I'm here would be that there's a concern around secondhand cannabis smoke. Cannabis secondhand smoke contains many of the same chemicals and carcinogens found in tobacco secondhand smoke. 33 of the compounds found in cannabis smoke are also on California's Proposition 65 list of chemicals known to cause cancer and reproductive harm, including lead, mercury, formaldehyde, and cadmium. And cannabis secondhand smoke contains twice as much tar, ammonia, and 8 times as much hydrogen cyanide as tobacco smoke. Another additional exposure would be secondhand high exposure. So there was a systematic study that I have cited here. I know it's too tiny, but I can always give you the name of the article. That looked at 15 human studies around exposure to secondhand cannabis smoke, and non-smokers that were exposed to secondhand cannabis smoke reported a secondhand high, and it was higher when the THC content was higher. Also, THC and THC metabolites were found in bodily fluid, including saliva, blood, and urine, and in one study, eye irritation was also reported. So some similar effects to tobacco smoke. Usually people exposed to secondhand tobacco smoke probably are reporting eye irritation, or in some cases you can find the chemical, I think it's cotinine, in the bloodstream of people who live or are around a lot of secondhand smoke or live with a smoker. So a little bit about the law. So as previous speakers mentioned, smoking and ingesting cannabis in any public place is prohibited. Smoking cannabis in locations where tobacco smoking is prohibited. Smoking within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare center, or youth center while children are present is prohibited. This changes with private residences. If you are within 1,000 feet and you're in a private residence, you are allowed to do whatever you want to do in your house. Smoking or ingesting cannabis while driving or as a passenger. And also, residential landlords can prohibit smoking of cannabis or tobacco on their properties. So again, it's helpful to check in with your landlord. So a concern is that, smoking cannabis is challenging California clean indoor air laws, which were put in place, to protect the public's health around spaces where we all work, live, and play. This infographic is also up on the California Department of Public Health's website if you wanted to get a better understanding of the law itself, or feel free to talk to me after. So who's using cannabis, or both actually. So the California Student Tobacco Survey is a large survey that goes to, I believe, I forget the number of schools, but it's a large number of schools that are surveyed with students, and what we're noticing is that there is a significant amount of co-use. Here it's at 8.5%, and the concern there is that nicotine is mixed in with the tobacco product that they're using with marijuana, and nicotine is considered to be an addictive product, so it kind of it could lead to addiction to tobacco or tobacco products. A separate survey, the online California Adult Tobacco Survey, surveys adults 18 to 64 on their uses and attitudes towards tobacco and e-cigarettes and marijuana, and we're finding that adults are using, and the rates are similar between tobacco and marijuana. There's not a big difference. There's also some co-use there. The concern is also with exposure. These results are also from the online California Adult Tobacco Survey. And so the 2016 bar that you see up there is prior to legalization, so about 20% of adults are reporting that they were exposed to marijuana secondhand smoke. After legalization, about a third of adults are reporting that they're being exposed to marijuana secondhand smoke. And sites of exposure. So the sidewalk and home are usually places where they're reporting higher rates of exposure. Again, just concern because of the chemicals that are found not just in tobacco smoke but also in marijuana secondhand smoke. And as the rates of exposure have increased, so has the support for smoke-free spaces. So we're finding that more and more adults under this survey are in support of marijuana smoke-free spaces. And sorry, I lost my thought there. So they are in support of those. So in 2016, the rate was 82.9%. As of 2017, about 89% of adults are in support of a smoke-free space. The 2018 results for both this survey and for the student tobacco use survey, we just received them. They're getting cleaned up, and they should be up on the California Department of Public Health's website fairly soon. And so you could see the increase or decrease with either of these fairly soon, hopefully. And here is my contact information. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening. Lots of great information, huh? Hopefully not too overwhelming. Let's see which button. Oh, there I am. So, I'm Dr. Ron Chapman. I am a family doctor, and I've lived in Davis for almost 24 years, raised my kids here, and I am your county health officer. So every county in the state of California by law is required to have a licensed physician appointed by the County Board of Supervisors to be the public health officer. So I have a lot of roles when it comes to that. One of them is to keep an eye on health trends in the communities, in the cities, for all populations, all groups of people in the county. And with us now having cannabis legal for recreational use, it raises some potential public health questions. You've heard some of the benefits, and certainly medicinal use. There's also increasing accessibility and availability to people who want to use for recreational or medicinal. There's certainly going to be improved benefits when it comes to the environment. Less impacts of cannabis grows, negative impacts on the environment. There's going to be less use of illegal pesticides like in the past, which not only improves and protects the environment, but also the products that go to consumers. One benefit that I'm really looking forward to, as Dr. Mo mentioned, more research, more science. Unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of great studies. And so looking forward to that coming as a benefit as well. And from a public health perspective, I think it's important for us as a community to understand the benefits and the harms. You've heard this study referred to already by one of the speakers. This is from the National Academy. They looked at all the research that had been done up to that point in 2017, published this report about the benefits and harms. Benefits, you've heard some of them. I also put others question mark because, again, there's going to be more and more research coming out. I think we're on a steep learning curve, and there's going to be some great information coming out. Harms from the National Academy report, low birth weight. Moms who use during pregnancy tend to have babies with lower birth weight that can have health problems from that. You've heard some about the impacts on adolescent brain development, schizophrenia and psychosis, increased motor vehicle crashes, respiratory illness, and cannabis use disorder, which is associated, as you heard, with early age use and frequency. And this is, again, referring to recreational use and folks that are using cannabis on a regular, daily basis. I mentioned pregnancy. The study was published last year in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which I also do not belong to. But we do respect their journal, I think. So Good Science in JAMA, highly respected, top-tier medical journal. And this study was on California pregnant women. And from 2009 to 16, use increased from 4 to 7%. And 19% of pregnant women 18 to 24 years old were screened positive in 2016. The American College of OBGYNs, which is the national group that takes care of moms and babies and sets policy, they have a policy statement that says pregnant women should not be using marijuana, should not be using cannabis. Because of the low birth weight babies, they also state that it shouldn't be used when new moms are breastfeeding babies. There's still a lot we don't understand about the impacts on newborns. You've seen this slide. This is the amount of THC that's in products that people are using for recreational use that don't have guidance from a smart doctor like Dr. Mo. And I think we are responsible for keeping an eye on the trends that are going to happen over the next few years. So I put this slide up because I want to make you aware of the California Healthy Kids Survey. This survey is administered to students in every district in California every other year in 7th, 9th, and 11th grades. So this is data from Davis Unified School District, 11th graders, so Davis High School, basically, primarily. And you can see 2012-13, 30% ever use of marijuana, 43% ever use of alcohol, 15% ever use of tobacco. So this survey has truckloads of data, a lot of data. I picked one data point just to show you that this survey is out there, and we need to watch this. We need to see how the increased accessibility and availability for recreational use is going to impact our youth. The numbers, as you can see, trending over time, hard to interpret whether there's anything really going on there. Ever use means that even if you tried it one time as an 11th grader. So there's actually 4 categories on the survey. It's no use, it's one time, it's a few times, and 7 times or greater. So this ever use lumps in anytime use. The National Institute for Health put out a report in 2016 showing that 6 million Americans met the criteria for marijuana use disorder. These are folks that are dependent on marijuana, whose lives have been disrupted by regular use, meaning they can't hold down jobs, they're not graduating from college, they're having relationships destroyed by the regular use. From 2001 to 2013, the percent of Americans who reported using in the past year doubled. 1.2 million first-time users in 2016 in the US were between 12 and 17 years old. And the director of the Institute made the comment in this report, marijuana can lead to harmful consequences for individuals and society. Again, referring to recreational use, which we as a community have approved. I'm most concerned about youth, about young adults, pregnant women, youth especially, as we all know, are highly influenced by marketing and advertising. And here is an ad offering a free gram. This is a full-page ad in the Cal Aggie from just a couple weeks ago. A full-page ad. I can't imagine seeing that for tobacco or alcohol. And likely there are several laws that were broken with that. At a minimum, for me, I question the ethics of a full-page ad targeting our college students. And so when it comes to the legality, I think it's great that we've been informed tonight about the new laws. My question is, how are we going to enforce these? Well, one thing we do for tobacco is we actually have sting operations in Davis, throughout the county, every city. The county, with the district attorney office, trains teenagers to go in and make tobacco purchases. We do this several times a year. And you'd be surprised at how many times Safeway, Nugget, others have been found to sell tobacco to minors. They're not doing it on purpose. Sometimes their staff aren't trained. Sometimes there's a lapse. It happens. And there are penalties and fines for when this happens. So the question is, who's going to be monitoring? Who's going to be keeping an eye on the new laws as they're rolling out for recreational use in Davis? Thank you.
Thank you. I got it. Lastly, we would like to welcome Patrick Ward and Myra Casillas, previous and a current UC Davis student. You want to use that one?
Good on you.
How's it going? My name is Patrick. I'm a marijuana addict. I'm also a rock star, so I'm going to be up here just telling myself, don't swear. Please don't swear. I'm going to be focusing on it. I was a student at Davis, and I guess we start off when I was younger. I was a jock, and I played sports with a group of friends since I was a young kid. And we were a group of friends, went to the same elementary school, middle school, high school, and I associated my identity with that group. And once high school ended, I was the only one who didn't go off to college. I went to junior college, but every single one of my friends in that group left. And so when I would look at my phone, once they all left, there was no one there to call. And I think I just eventually started to smoke weed just because it cured loneliness. It was like someone to hang out with, even though it was just with myself. And it just slowly, gradually, I wasn't addicted at first, but then it kept getting more and more. And then I don't know how I got into Davis. I was at least smart enough to get in. And when I first started, I was a good student and I was studying. I told myself I wouldn't smoke that much. But then once midterms and finals and everything came along, I think I smoked more to get away from the responsibility and the pressure of it all. I would smoke even more and more and more, and then pretty soon I was missing classes and I wasn't doing anything. I was just staying at home and playing this video game called Rocksmith, which I was so good at. And but then eventually I knew that I wasn't doing anything with my life. I knew that there was something bigger. And I remember when it was 5 years ago, it was when Davis stopped having kids smoking cigarettes on campus. And there was advertisement everywhere of helping these people quit cigarettes. And I would see signs. And when I was on the bus to miss class so I could go home and get super high, I saw one of the advertisements on, like, by the window, and it's saying, if you need help to quit smoking, come here. And I was thinking, okay, that's for cigarettes, but I wonder if they have that for weed. And then in came Stephanie, right there, who was the counselor, and it took about a year for me to really quit smoking. I'm telling you, like, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to admit. It's a tough thing to even say, because there's a stigma to saying that you're addicted to marijuana, because it's not addicting. It's just weed, brah. And so eventually, after about the year of trying, I would tell Steph, and what was great about Steph is she didn't just say stop smoking now. She's like, all right, let's limit it. Let's see how we can maybe curtail the amount of use that you're doing. And the reason why that was a good approach, at least for me, was because it gave me the chance to tell myself that I was an addict. She didn't tell me I was an addict. I had to figure that out on my own. And boy, was I an addict. And it didn't get to the point, or it got to the point where we said, if I come in here again and I'm still smoking, I will go into an in-treatment center. And that's when it really hit me, oh my goodness, I almost just swore right there and I stopped myself. But I was like, it was a point where I realized this is a real big problem. And that's what really helped me to stop. And it took me 7 to 8 months of really getting through the withdrawals. I'm telling you, my brothers all say that I'm a con artist and I'm faking telling you this, that I'm an addict. But I'm telling you, it was a really difficult thing, in that my roommate in college, he could smoke and be fine. If there was no weed, then he'd be, all right, we're not smoking tonight. For me, I'd be looking on the ground, looking for the crumbs of weed. And I guess the point is that for some people, and I guess I would say 9% of adults, at least it was for me, it was a really, really tough thing to quit and to admit to myself that that was something that I was addicted to, because it's like a weenie drug. That's my brother's saying that. And so yeah, I guess I'm here saying it's addicting. That it actually can be, at least for some people, not for all, but it definitely can be a drug that takes a while to get rid of, and you have withdrawals and everything. And so with that, I will give it up with Myra. Thank you guys very much.
I'll use a microphone. My name is Myra. I'm also a UC Davis student. So I am a little nervous to share about how it affect me, especially because I see an audience or somebody that knows me. And I've been around in spaces where they usually smoke weed and I do not. And I don't think I ever shared why I don't. So the reason why I don't is because I used to smoke a lot of weed in the past. And that's actually the first thing I started doing, like at the age of 20, 21. It didn't really affect me then, but within time it did. It went into the point where I maybe tried something else, right? But I will focus on how weed affected me. And what it did, I just started increasing like more anxiety. It got to the point where I didn't want to smoke anymore, and I just felt like I needed it. Like my body was asking for it. I recall like calling friends just to smoke weed. I would get a lot of anxiety. It also got to a point where there was a couple of times, especially this one time, I remember smoking weed and then they put like wax in it, and I had a psychotic like breakdown. It got to the point where at the moment, I don't even know how that happened, but I shared this with Stephanie before, and I shared it in the past, where like I wanted to kill my friend. I don't know why. Like I just recall being in a scenario and there was like a knife next to it, and I just remember telling my friends like, can we just get out of here, please? Like I need to like step away. And I guess they realized that it was really like affecting my brain, that they just took me somewhere else and it just went away. There was other scenarios where I felt like I was running out of breath and I was gonna faint. And it was just by smoking weed or eating an edible. So that's what I experienced. I used to also have like a lot of anger issues. Now, today, I still have difficulty concentrating. I do still go through like hallucinations. There's certain times I'll be in a certain scenario where things, it has affected me mentally. It has. I see a doctor, a psychiatrist, and they say I'm bipolar, and until this day, I still don't believe I'm bipolar. I'm still having a difficult time accepting it. And I asked the psychiatrist, how did that happen? And there's a possibility that by smoking weed, it developed because maybe in the past, I already had like some kind of disorder. I just didn't know, and that just triggered it. As in for me, it didn't get to the point where I would like look for weed in the ground. But I do have friends. I did meet someone that his last $5 he will spend it on weed. And I'll share this with you. I know it's on my stories his, but I'll just share how, because I was there. We were going to pick up weed, and he had no gas, like no gas. He only had $5, and he's like, I am not stopping at a gas station. He went straight to pick up just weed, and this is like back in the days with this, it has nothing to do with medicated weed. And literally on the way back, I was scared, and he literally just stopped by a gas station and just put like quarters or like 30 cents just so we can make it back. That is the first time in my life that I seen somebody like just spend their last $5 on weed, knowing that we could be stranded without gas on the way back. That's something I did. It wasn't me, but I seen it, I witnessed it. And I do have one friend that he developed schizophrenia by smoking weed. Like I said, that's not my story. This is just the people I know. But based on the experiences I have, I do strongly believe that smoking weed can affect the brain. Not everyone, but it can. And so that's all I want to share for today, and thank you.
Can we do another round of applause for all of our presenters tonight? So right now we're gonna have an intermission. We're gonna take about a 5-minute break. There is water and snacks in the lobby. Please help yourself. Also, there are resource tables out there, so please grab some of those. If you have questions that you put on the blue sheets, there's a collection basket in the lobby. There's also some of us who have these name tags on who can also take those. We're gonna transition next to our question and answer section. Thank you. Okay, now we're gonna get started again for all of the questions. I see people are ready for them. First question that we have is, what metrics were used by the City of Davis City Council to determine the number of dispensaries were reasonable for a town of 60,000 people and a top university with 30,000+ young adults?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Diane Perro, and I work for the City of Davis, and I worked on the team that helped craft the regulation and the ordinances that made our businesses permitted. In the early days, there was a very important article published by the League of California Cities, which is one of the organizations that most of our cities look to for guidance. And one guidepost they issued was approximately one dispensary for 15,000 residents. And since our city has a little over 60,000 residences, that led us to thinking about the number 4. And I just want you to know that 4 was before we knew anything about how many dispensaries might apply for a license. We also didn't know if any of our cities on our border or the county would approve dispensaries. So the initial guideline of 4 was recommended to council, and they accepted that and then revised it to 5. So at this point, additional applications won't be accepted till some analysis is done, but I think that was just a guideline and it's not a forever milestone.
Thank you.
I don't know if whoever asked that question, if that was enough.
And that was a pre-question. And actually, if you can stand right there, there's another question I think that will be good for you. Okay, so what amount of taxes from the local dispensaries will go to the city of Davis and Yolo County? And is this enough to compensate for the increase in police services, social services, and loss of productivity to local workforce?
Yes. Thank you for that question. I won't be addressing the loss of productivity to the local workforce. And the way that this product is taxed, there's lots of different aspects of this, and it's not completely straightforward, so I'll make it as simple as I can. The businesses that are operating with licenses in our city have paid many fees and many licenses and that will be ongoing. So some were one time and some will continue as long as they're in business. The regulatory fees are meant to cover the costs to the city. So the extra police work that we have to do, the extra amount of financial work we do, auditing. So their fees cover that so that the taxpayers are not actually covering those costs. So that's a fee, that's not a tax. The product itself is taxed in different ways, both by the state and by the city, and we receive different amounts depending on whether the product is purchased under a medical card or not a medical card. So in general, we don't know how much revenue this business might produce for the city. I can tell you right now we have only very much history with the manufacturers. They're the only ones that have been open for more than a few months. So I think at the end of this fiscal year, which will be June of next year, we'll have a much better idea of whether this is a revenue, a high revenue business or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
This next question is, are there any regulations regarding the use of pesticides on cannabis?
Working. Wait, there it is. Whew. So I'll do my best. I'm not an agriculture expert, but I do work closely with the ag commissioner and the sheriff, especially in past years when they've done raids of illegal grows in Yolo County and have discovered literally 55-gallon drums of pesticides that have been brought over from the border from Mexico that are totally illegal here. So the rules and regs that are set at the federal level for a cannabis grow apply to any other type of crop. So they have to use accepted pesticides that are known to be safe for human consumption. So the same ag regulations would apply to a legal grow now.
Yeah, the state has regulations in place as well, where they test for those pesticides, which basically they don't allow you to use them.
Okay. Next question. Can I ingest weed in my home if I have a medical recommendation, even if my lease says no weed?
So a person should always abide by the terms of their lease. Landlords have a right to deny any smoking of cannabis in your rental unit. They can always prohibit cigarettes as well as cannabis. And if a person has a question about what is prohibited and what is not, you should have a conversation with your landlord to make sure that you're abiding by the terms of your lease. And state law allows certain things to be done in homes and it's not considered a crime. However, cannabis, we're just getting into that realm, and a lot of leases right now do not speak to the fact of illegal substances such as cannabis, which is not illegal anymore. So the best thing is to talk to your landlord about it to ensure that you're on the same page with each other, and just realize that it's legal in California, but it's still not legal federally.
Can I comment that pretty much applies just to the smoking of the product? And the product can be ingested and used in a multitude of different ways to get medicinal help from it. So I'm pretty sure that there's no laws that you can't use a tincture or a topical cannabis in your rental unit. But I'm a doctor, I don't know laws. But I can't imagine how they could limit that or even know that that was happening.
The next question is, if you buy a certain brand or a certain formulation of CBD oil, can you be assured when you buy it again? Would anyone of the dispensaries like to answer that?
I'm Ashley Camera, Director of Davis Cannabis Collective. All of the CBD products that we sell are tested by a state licensed laboratory before we can sell them. Each product has a list of the content, of the milligram content, and so you can be assured, even if there's a slight variance, you can still take the same dose. Meaning if you want 5 milligrams, just read the label and then take 5 milligrams.
Next question, how can you tell and or prove that a person is driving under the influence of marijuana?
Good question. It's basically what you're going to have to prove is impairment, and I can let somebody from the DA's office speak to that. But if you're stopped, just like if you're stopped for a DUI with alcohol and or other drugs, the officer is going to have to prove impairment.
Yeah, so like Ron was saying, a lot of it is going to depend on impairment. Now, one of the misconceptions with marijuana is that if you smoke any marijuana before driving, it's automatically a DUI. That's certainly not the case. Everything really depends on the amount you ingest as well as tolerance, along with the strength. So, for example, if someone's never, ingested cannabis before and they go straight to the BHO, the oils or the edibles, they're probably not going to be in the best position to drive. As for the district attorney's office, what we're looking for is not whether you just ingested it. We're really looking for that impairment. And impairment comes down to two different types. It comes down to mental impairment. Are you able to divide your tasks and focus on the act of driving? And then also physical. Are you having some type of spatial distortion? Are you able to walk okay? And the way we do that is we rely on people like Ron, who are administering field sobriety tests and divided attention tests in the field. And when we get these cases, we're looking at their driving pattern, we're looking at their statements regarding ingestion, whether there are signs of recent ingestion, and then the big one is what are the results of the field sobriety tests? And then, of course, do they have marijuana or some type of cannabis synthetic in their blood?
Thank you. The next question says, what about the nuisance of smoke to neighbors? And I'm taking this as what rights does neighbors have in the event that they want to report something, or the impact? Either or.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Can you repeat the question again?
The question is, what about the nuisance of smoke to neighbors?
Okay.
Nuance, sorry.
In terms of smoking or nuisance to neighbors, if the tenant, I think it would be best to look at your policy, and if your apartment complex is, or wherever you're living is smoke-free. It gets harder once you live in a private residence. And I would suggest reaching out to your landlord and discussing the issue, and your neighbors as well, to see if it's an issue, and working together to possibly get a smoke-free policy passed in your complex. Another suggestion would be to reach out to your local health department to see what kind of resources they can offer you. And there's always the state as well. We're happy to take your questions and direct them to the right person. It gets a little tricky with tobacco control because it's smoke, but it's smoke related to marijuana. So we can help, but we also want to make sure that we're directing you to the right person. So if there's in some cases, there is like a nuisance clause in your contract that you sign, and so you could, you have some kind of ground there to stand and talk to your neighbor about stopping their smoking. But I would suggest, again, looking at or talking to your local health department and seeing what kind of resources they can offer.
Thank you. Next question. How can we educate our preteens and teens about the dangers of youth cannabis use?
I would say there's a couple of different things. One is just getting the facts and getting information out and bringing people out to talk both pro and con about it, because marijuana is just like any other substance. It's a drug, but there are other drugs and there's pros and cons to it. So I would say bringing people out, getting the information out, and getting the factual information out instead of, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So it's really about trying to get information out. But I think one of the biggest things is to just talk about, if you don't know, talk to people like myself or Dr. Mo or some of the other people that would be willing to come out and talk about what is going on, so that people can ask questions. And I think the other thing is, it's really important, like we talked about, don't just be automatically like, no, I'm not going to talk about it, or, oh, it's fine. It's like, get information so that people can actually learn what the marijuana of today is, because it's very different. And I think the other thing is also and I don't know how we can do this, but I agree, we've got to get it to become a Schedule II drug so that we can start to do research.
What is the policy of the Davis Police Department regarding the arrest of juveniles for marijuana possession?
Chief, you want to respond to that?
And again, the question is, what is the policy of the Davis Police Department regarding the arrest of juveniles for marijuana possession?
Hi, I'm Deputy Chief David Delaini. When it comes to juveniles and any kind of crime accusations, we always take a really holistic approach at how we deal with it. We have diversion programs and different things like that. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis. So it depends and on the circumstances. I'm also a lawyer, so that's always a good answer, right? It depends. But again, at the beginning, especially with juveniles, the idea is to not put them into the criminal justice system, but it's kind of to do diversion. We want to try to rehabilitate, as we do with pretty much everybody, but with juveniles especially. So I don't know if I danced around too much, but hopefully I answered the question. If I didn't, and it's your question, you can feel free to grab me afterwards.
Can I speak to it from my angle? So from the aspect of just educating parents and teens, I actually encourage doing well physicals with my teenagers. Starting at age 12, they get Dr. Mo's Teen Talk. And I do talk to them about mainly choosing who their friends are and who they hang out with and who they're palling around with, and that's how they're going to decide what they're going to do. It's easier to say no if you're just not in the situation. The other thing I'm just going to say that I did with my children is I purchased, and this was something I learned from the city of Davis, Treat, I think. Treese, yes, and where she said, buy drug kits and tell your kids you're going to test them, whether you are or you're not, but show them. And I actually put drug test kits on my bathroom counter and said nothing. And my teenagers said, what's this? I'm like, oh, I just have it around just in case I feel like you're acting weird and I want to test you. And they go, what? And I just said, that's just how I'm going to be doing it. So when I decide your grades drop, this happens, I don't like who you're hanging out with, you're getting tested. They then can tell their friends, my mom tests me, and it offers them an out. So to me, I think that that's a method to help with young people, and it worked well for me so far. Bam, 2 are in college.
Yes. The next one is also a legal question. Can someone please discuss the legal issues involved with flying? So I guess like air transportation with marijuana.
Federal, illegal.
There we got it.
Sorry.
Thank you. The F in FAA stands for federal.
That is true. And I can personally say that I just got tickets to go to the East Coast for the holidays, and it is in there. So, okay, what are the benefits or consequences of using CBD oil as a sleep aid versus a supplement like melatonin? The doctors in the house?
No way.
I can take it.
Wait.
I'll go. Okay. So, we've got a doc in the house, and I'm answering this one. So basically, what? What do you want to say? So she actually said it a little while ago, and I'm just going to reiterate it. CBD oil actually can help with sleep. THC in high doses does not help with sleep. It's my last slide before I got booted off because my slides were too long. Is if you've got too much THC, it affects you for 3 to 4 hours. That's the time you're high, and that's if you're just smoking not every single day, 4 or 5 times a day, but if you're just smoking like once or twice. So basically what happens with CBD is CBD will actually help you sleep, but again, you have to have, like she said before, a little bit of THC, but it's better and it will help with melatonin. It does the same thing as melatonin. So the CBD is what actually helps, not the THC. So you want to make sure if you're getting a tincture, it has CBD oil and not the high THC levels.
I think I'm just going to speak to high THC levels, which are what you're using to get high and what people smoke for recreational, and that effect is different than, say, a 3 to 1, which if you have like that much THC to CBD is actually pretty low THC and is actually going, and micro dosing, so instead of like taking 100 milligrams at once, you take 2. Like that's going to be really different and actually help you with sleep with THC. So that's very different than dabbing and getting a whole heavy dose. CBD in like a 20 to 1, 18 to 1, where you're like helping with anxiety and some things like that, which is where I think those would be useful, actually can keep you up. So like it's not really going to be your best bet. You're going to want to have a little more THC to CBD. Correct me if I'm wrong, my dispensary people. I count on them a lot because they help me out, we help each other out. But mainly, that's kind of what you're going to be looking for. And because what people use to get high is high THC, a lot, 50 to 1, 90 to 1, things like that, where CBD, like you barely see it. So it's so different, and there's just so much learning to be had. And again, I'm just going to plug leafly.com, where you can read a lot of articles and learn a lot from that resource.
So what I liked about the question is it's asking how does it compare to melatonin? And that's a great question. And that's where, again, I'm excited about more legalization so we can get more research so we can do the kind of studies that answer that kind of question, which presently don't exist.
And the one more thing, like melatonin, as my experience is, some people 1 milligram of melatonin, they're bonk, and they're like, that's too much. And another person like, I took 10 and it does nothing. So there's a lot of individualization of medicine, and I really would like you all to think about different medicines you've taken, friends and family you speak to. That's kind of the case with all medicine.
Well, and then there's side effects too. I mean, I've had a lot of folks that take melatonin and get horrible headaches. And so having an alternative is great.
And some people are extremely THC averse. It's just not for them. I start most of my first consultations with, what'd you do when you were a teenager? Did you try it? What was the effect? And if it's bad, 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 I'm like, ooh, we're gonna go very, very cautiously and carefully. If other people are like, oh no, all through my teens, it was great, it made me study, it helped me, I got sleep, then we have a whole different conversation because it's very individualized.
Thank you. The next question is, can you discuss the usage of cannabis for falling asleep and staying asleep? Very similar to the previous question.
My number one recommendation for sleep is meditation. I'm just gonna put that out there. Do not watch the news.
Facts. Okay. Is vaping harmful to your lungs?
Jury's out.
Yeah, we need more studies. I mean, and there are some studies out of UCSF that have looked at the chemical composition of the vape, and there could be some nasty chemicals depending upon where it comes from and a bunch of variables. But the long-term implications, I think we need to wait.
There was a study that I was at Mayo Clinic a couple years ago getting certification, and there was a few studies where they found with people vaping, they're actually having pneumonia and they're also having spots on their lungs. And they're finding with over time it's actually more harmful than we first thought. The one thing I will say is the Juul, if anyone's using a Juul, has the same amount of nicotine content as a cigarette. So if someone's vaping it all day long, it can actually be more detrimental than actually smoking. But the jury's out as far as long-term effects.
So I do want to add one piece. There's the whole flavored part of this. And the flavor additives are what's used basically for ingestion, for eating. And now people are inhaling into their lungs. So we really have no track record of understanding the implications of that.
Are you talking about nicotine vaping or cannabis? Because, I know that some of them have like bases, the base was really like properly black, but a lot of the companies for cannabis have known.
Yeah, I was talking about e-cigarettes. Thank you.
I was talking about e-cigarettes too.
Yeah.
I guess just to add to the Juul thing, one pod has is equal to a pack of cigarettes. So if your teen is using that all day,
But is that talking about nicotine or what's actually in cigarettes? Talking about cartridges that are actually having an effect.
so can you repeat your question?
You're talking about the nicotine. That's
In Juul.
the part. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the cartridges, isn't that what's affecting the lungs? That's what kind of like gives you cancer.
Yeah.
So it's like, isn't that what we should be looking at when it comes to vaping and Juul and all that other kind of stuff?
Mhm. Yeah. And I would also, again, suggest checking out the California Department of Public Health's website. The Tobacco Control Program has a lot of fact sheets on vaping if you're interested, and you can always contact us, and somebody will get to you within the week and answer your questions.
Definitely. And as we have more questions, again, we are not going to answer all of these. We could spend all night, all week here.
I just want to make a really quick point on that. If someone is actually vaping marijuana and tobacco together, that actually can be really, really dangerous. And that's one of the things, that's where I'm seeing a lot of psychotic breaks and a lot of addiction is from the tobacco and marijuana together.
So our next question is marijuana as addictive as alcohol?
One of my favorite questions, apples and oranges. The way I look at it is with alcohol, you take one sip of an alcoholic beverage and you're not necessarily drunk. If you're inhaling marijuana, you take one hit, you will be high. So it's really comparing apples and oranges. Now, if we're talking about ingesting it or eating it, again, it can take up to 120 minutes if you're ingesting it before, if you're using it not medicinally, but you get high. It can take up to 120 minutes. So again, it can be, it's two different animals, but can it be addicting? You've heard two people today where it absolutely was addicting for them. So it can be addicting. And I think, again, it goes back to really depending on who you are. Do you have a family history? What's going on for you? I always say I love my job because it's not like a checkbox. I like to think it's an octagon. Because some people it could be this thing and yeah, they're really addicted. Other people it could be 4 or 5 times they're not addicted. Other people can use it just recreationally. It's one of the reasons we did make marijuana recreationally legal because some people can use it. So it's really a yes or no.
And I think you spoke very much to if it can impair you in the same way, and that is definitely true. You can definitely get impaired much quicker with the use of cannabis than alcohol if you're using it recreationally for that purpose. As far as addiction, and terminology that gets tossed around in the lay press versus medical. So true addiction to cannabis medically, it doesn't happen. And it is addictive, and I do want to use the term of, say, people you know that are addicted to gambling, people you know who are addicted to video games. It turns on things in their brain, other biochemicals, dopamine, endorphins, things like that. But the way cannabis as a biochemical works with receptors, it's different just in the words we use of tolerance, addiction, and withdrawal in a medicinal world. And I know it maybe doesn't necessarily matter because it still can be a big problem, obviously, and as the two young people shared with us, it can be a very serious problem and you can feel pretty lousy and withdraw. But you don't die, and you can do it and stop and stay stopped in a very different way. And again, it's person to person. Individualization, different people who are going to be more apt to become addicted to something than others. That's a nature of different people and their family structures and things like that.
The one thing I will say, and I don't know if you're seeing it, Dr. Mo, but I'm seeing it a lot more, is again, and this is my little soapbox if you haven't figured it out, is the tobacco and marijuana together. That's where I'm seeing much more of the psychotic breaks, much more of the panic attack, much more of the physical withdrawal. Not that there isn't physical withdrawal from marijuana itself, but it's the two together are having much more problematic, where I've actually had 4 or 5 people that have gone into an inpatient treatment program because of the severity of the two together.
Nicotine is one of the addictions that's the most difficult to quit. They are targeting our children. They do want to get them hooked, and nicotine is getting in that. That is why I am promoting the dispensaries of pure, regulated, good cannabis that potentially is helping people for medicinal reasons, that they may be self-medicating with not as good product, and therefore and I'm not a big promoter. I mean, I have teens and I don't want them all just token up, but I mean, there are definitely young people that get benefits, and the drugs that we put them on are nasty and awful and do also cause all sorts of problems. The Adderall, which is a methamphetamine that we put kids on, and it's mind-blowing to me that this plant that I believe is sacred. I'm going to be all goo-goo on ya. But it's really, really, really a thing that can help people, used in the right setting, used in the regulated market, used from dispensaries that we know what we're getting, as opposed to our kids that they're going to buy it at school. They're gonna. So if we can help them figure out how to use it properly, I think it's just going to be a better avenue, personally. I also just want to say, I'm going to say one more quick thing about tobacco and pregnancy, and people don't want to hear this, but I am going to say it, and I'm going to get on my little soapbox for my homie Kelly. She is, most of the studies that are about pregnancy and cannabis use are not just cannabis alone. They do often have other drugs that they use in conjunction, and more research is needed for cannabis by itself, because the drugs that our pregnant women use to help their nausea are gross and yucky and cause a lot of problems. In cannabis as a plant that our native cultures have used for centuries successfully, and there are very good studies out of Jamaica. Nobody wants to hear about that, but they're really good studies of actually kids that are more intelligent and more creative and things like that. But America's not the only place that people can do studies. There's actually a lot of studies out of other countries.
Thank you. So we're going to keep moving. Absolutely. And definitely thank you for all of the comments. We definitely we encourage you to keep having these conversations, bringing them forward. We definitely want to continue this conversation. It does not stop here. I do want to give chance to answer some more questions, because a lot of questions were submitted to us. I think the dispensaries, we have some dispensaries who are here from Davis. There was a couple of questions that we delivered to you all that I'd like to give a chance for you to answer.
Hey everyone, my name is Kimberly Cargile. I'm a director at Davis Cannabis Collective. I want to read the question first of all, and it says, what will the new dispensaries in Davis do to address the impact of the war on drugs on communities of color? And there's so much that I could say about this. We could be here all night. There's so much I want to say in general about tonight. Keep want to throw things in there, like I graduated with honors on the dean's list as a presidential scholar because I used medical marijuana instead of the pharmaceuticals that were prescribed to me that were making me not able to function. So I've been very successful in my life as a medical cannabis patient, and I don't want people to think you're going to go home and have a psychotic break, because it doesn't happen to everybody. It does happen, but there's also very successful stories. The first thing that we can do as dispensaries and as people in this room, leaving this room, is, and the first thing we can do to make a change in anything is acknowledgement. To understand that this is a problem, and this has been a huge problem for people of color in our country. Over 50% of the arrests for drugs in this country are for cannabis. And even though blacks and whites use cannabis the same, Blacks in the entire nation are 4 times more likely to be arrested and are arrested, and there's some states where it's up to 8 and 9%. I mean, it is serious. And it is cannabis, the plant, which is a non-toxic alternative to many pharmaceuticals and alcohol, is being used as a tool to discriminate against young men of color especially. And this is happening. So the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that this has happened and that this is happening. And that's why we need decriminalization in this country, to take that tool away from police officers that are discriminated against people of color. The second thing we need to do is spread the education. One of our main focuses at Davis Cannabis Collective is to take every opportunity we can to educate people. Like tonight's education. Next week I'm speaking at Sac State. I have a speaking engagement scheduled for the CHP and the DMV to talk about impairment. And finally, something we do is we've committed 5% of our profit to charity. And at a therapeutic alternative in Sacramento, our sister dispensary, we donate to about 20 different charities every month. 3 of those specifically work to help change the impacts that the war of drugs has had on people of color. So we donate to the ACLU, the Marijuana Policy Project, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and the National Organization for Marijuana Laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Reed. I am the CEO of F Street Dispensary. We're the only dispensary in town that's locally owned and locally operated. My brother and I do own the dispensary. The question, I think, is pretty fitting for me to answer. What are some of the pathways to a career in the cannabis industry? I had 0 experience in the cannabis industry, and like any other industry, I think hard work and perseverance plays the biggest part. If anyone's interested in getting into the cannabis industry, doing things that are in line with the job you would like. So if you want to be a grower, well, hopefully you're doing things in your garden, studying up on how plants grow and being ready to talk about that when you go to an interview. At our dispensary, we've hired a lot of people that don't have direct experience, and we just try to figure out, are they passionate about this? What do they know? What is their customer service? So like many jobs that people want, it's your knowledge and your experience that play into how good of a fit you may be to doing something new. And if whomever asked that question would like to speak with me more, I'd be happy to talk to them or anyone else after the program tonight. And I just wanted to thank UCD and the City of Davis for putting this on. We've gotten a lot out of it. It's been a wonderful evening, and thank you to all the panelists and the speakers.
I do have a question here. Where do I go to in the county for a medical card, and what is the paperwork needed?
Well, first of all, because of Prop 64, you really don't necessarily need a medical card. So, and I would like the dispensary owners to speak up to this. I think there is a lot of misinformation about that. Having a county medical card, I'm not sure that it really gives you a whole lot other than when you check out, you can buy more at once. And I think that there might be access to some products behind the counter that some people don't have access to, but I think that that's fairly limited. And I know that a lot of people talk about cost. It does cost a lot, and I'm going to put a plug for, if we could deschedule it, we could get insurance to pay for it and not all this out-of-pocket cost. So, I mean, that would be awesome. Just, I don't think that's happening anytime soon, but I can try to dream. So the cost issues and the tax issues, I don't know that there's even that huge of a difference. These guys can speak to that, but I don't think it's huge. And I really have talked to a lot of my patients who have gone through the county. It costs money to get the county card. So the taxes you might save, you paid on the front end instead of on the back end, depending on how much you're using. So it really might not pay off at all if you think about it in that regard. So, I mean, you can go online. There's a bunch of different places that I will be very honest here and probably blow myself up. But I just went online to hellomd.com and I got a discount through someone I know, like through Canamami, and just talked to a guy on FaceTime and got a card sent to me in the mail. And that lasted me a year, and then a year later I did it again. And I mean, I do that because I do want to have access, because I like to go into all the places, and some of the places when you have a medical card just are a little easier to go in. But most of my patients that know me and the dispensaries know me, and they get a letter from me in my office, which I do have a closed practice, so even though I'm probably one of the few doctors in town that are giving that, and I can't open the floodgates, but they just get a letter that says I've medically recommended it, and I put all the codes of the state and things like that, and then they just use that letter. There are doctors, and this is one of my little taglines that I like to say at these talks. You all are now soldiers. Go to your doctor and say this is something that you are interested in. They then have to learn more about it. I just did this on my own. I took an online course. I had 13 units of learning. I go on Leafly a lot. I read a lot of things. I go to a lot of conferences. I talk to my patients. I talk to my dispensary bud tenders. And I learned through the years, I learned something new every day. And they could. A lot of them are saying things that they can't. I work for UC Davis. I got approved to be able to talk about this and help people get access from my bosses to be able to do this. And so far, I'm not in jail or fired. And actually, my practice is bulging, and my regular patients can't get in to see me. But then there's that. So you can just go online and get a card.
Thank you. So some of our panel members have some cards from questions. So we'll give you an opportunity also to answer one. We are acknowledging that time is a thing. If you do have to leave, you're free to do so. But we will continue to answer a few more questions. Do you want to go?
Oh, Ron.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. You're on. Oh,
Ron, one or the other.
This question says we are allowed to grow up to 6 plants, but only allowed to possess an ounce. Does not compute. I would agree. So, if you're gonna have cannabis at your personal residence, keep it at your personal residence. Don't walk out in public place with more than 28.5 grams of cannabis, and you'll be okay. Contrary to popular belief, we're not necessarily looking for people with cannabis. The state has basically, the voters have voted, myself voted, and made it legal. So there's not, we're just making sure that people are in compliance now, and that's really it. You can read the laws, you can educate yourselves and determine what you can and cannot do. And that's what I would advise.
Okay. So we're going to answer 2 more questions. Does anybody have one they really want to answer?
This question asks, what are the different compounds of, I'm going to replace the word with cannabis, and what do they do? And then how much of THC is effective use for medicinal purpose, and then how much THC is in recreational marijuana. Those are, the gentleman in the back spoke to that there are a number of different cannabinoids. We mostly tonight talked a lot about THC and CBD, and those are the big ones. But CBN and THCA and CBDA, which are fabulous if not heated and extracted and used for anti-inflammatory purposes. CBG, there's a lot of different cannabinoids. And then you mix in the different terpenes, and then you mix in the different flavonoids and how it, and then you mix in the different delivery systems, and it just it blows up of the different things that are available that different people can use. And again, from person to person, I get different feedback. There's not going to be a thing that's like, this works for everyone. So people are going to have to try. And that is a challenge. And I echo that with my patients of that it can be really, really difficult because you have to lay out some money and it might not work at all or it might make you feel lousy. I don't know how to necessarily address that, but I mean, we usually sell most of these things in the beginning in these very like kind of small quantities, and then you can get larger quantities. So there's that. I wish we did that with prescription drugs, where I could give them 10, but then you got to pay a full copay for whatever. So we don't do that in regular medicine. But I mean, the dispensaries do that to help people out. They give small amounts. It's really hard because it's so individualized and people really need to try different things and see how different things affect them. So all the questions that I was given are really hard, and they're hard just because it is so individualized, and it is going to take some work between potentially you and your bud tender and you and your physician if they educate themselves more.
Any other questions? Okay, let's give one more round of applause for our panel tonight and all of the folks who came and contributed to this wonderful event. We do ask that you fill out the surveys as you're leaving, the evaluations. You should have received one. If not, we have them in the back. Again, I want to thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. And again, I cannot emphasize enough that the conversation does not stop here. So definitely talk with your doctors, talking your professional and your personal networks, because we all have to do it. Thank you.